Welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Nkem Ifejika. Our top stories. There's mounting international concern as Israel launches a wave of airstrikes against what it calls Iranian targets in Syria. The UK threatens to cut funding for Oxfam following claims that the charity covered up a scandal involving aid workers and prostitutes in Haiti. And Britain's Foreign Secretary says Myanmar must ensure Rohingya Muslims return home safely. He's set to meet Aung San Suu Kyi on Sunday. The United States and Russia say they're concerned about an escalation of cross-border violence between Israel and Iranian-backed forces in Syria. Israeli fighter planes launched bombing raids across the border following the shooting down of one of its jets. Israel says it's been targeting Iranian positions on Syrian territory used to fly drones over Israeli airspace. Tom Bateman reports from Jerusalem.
What was left on Israeli soil of one of the country's most advanced fighter jets. It crashed after its two pilots ejected, said Israel, amid Syrian anti-aircraft fire. One pilot was left severely injured. Israel said it scrambled the planes in response to this, a drone allegedly sent by Iranian forces in Syria into Israeli airspace. It was destroyed. Israel then hit the site it said the drone had come from before further strikes against what it called Iranian targets in Syria.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military entrenchment in Syria. Iran seeks to use Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying Israel.
Israel is wary about the threat across its northern border, with the Syrian regime, backed by Iran and its proxies like these Hezbollah fighters, back in control of much territory. Syria's conflict has drawn in her neighbours. There have been dozens of Israeli airstrikes in Syria in recent years. In December, Israel hit what it said was a newly built Iranian military site. As recently as this week, a suspected chemical weapons factory was targeted. Iran has accused Israel of lies, claiming it has only military advisors in Syria. Israel says it doesn't want an escalation in Syria, but in a highly volatile atmosphere where any of the players is capable of miscalculation, there remains open the distinct possibility of precisely that. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news. Turkey says one of the military helicopters has been shot down in the north of Syria. It happened near Afrin, where Turkish forces are fighting Kurdish militants. Kurdish fighters say they brought the aircraft down and claim that 16 Turkish soldiers were killed. The Turkish military said that 2 soldiers on board the aircraft had died. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in the Palestinian territories, the first such visit by a head of the Indian government. He held talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas as part of a Middle East tour. Officials in Delhi say his trip is intended to help the Palestinians develop their health, information technology and education services. And thousands of demonstrators have taken part in an anti-racism march in the central Italian town of Macerata, a week after a far-right extremist drove around the city shooting at Africans, wounding 6 people. The drive-by attack followed the arrest of a Nigerian suspected of murdering and dismembering a local woman. The scandal over what happened in Haiti 8 years ago is deepening. The UK's International Development Secretary has warned that Oxfam will have funding withdrawn if it fails to comply with authorities over safeguarding issues. Haiti's ambassador to the UK has told the BBC that he believes that Oxfam did try to cover up details of the use of prostitutes by some of its aid workers in the aftermath of the earthquake in 2010. The charity's chief executive does admit that they could have been more open, but insisted there was no attempts to hide the truth. Angus Crawford reports.
It was an earthquake that devastated Haiti, killing more than 200,000 people, affecting millions more. Aid agencies from around the world stepped into the chaos. Oxfam, with more than 70 years' experience, had hundreds of staff in the field. But an investigation by The Times found that in 2011, 4 staff members were sacked and 3 others resigned over allegations of misconduct, including paying local women for sex. The NGO says it launched an investigation and kept the Charity Commission fully informed, something the Commission now disputes. Oxfam's leadership denies there's been a cover-up.
Oxfam was actually proactive in going to the British public, the Department for International Development and the Charity Commission to explain that there had been serious misconduct and we'd taken action.
More than £30 million of taxpayers' money is given to Oxfam by the government every year. Today, Downing Street called the allegations truly shocking and demanded a full and urgent investigation. Today, fresh claims. Some of the disgraced staff got jobs at other aid agencies because Oxfam failed to warn them about the misconduct.
It is clear it's a cover-up case. The fact that those folks were allowed to leave the country without any punishment, without even informing relevant Haitian authorities about that, it was a cover-up. And now, the fact that they did such a crime, or there was such a cover-up, now we are wondering how many of those cases are still happening in Haiti. We don't know.
The Haitian authorities want Oxfam to hand over all relevant documents, so justice can be served there. The behaviour of a few has stained the charity's past reputation and now threatens its work in the future. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
A double-decker bus has overturned in Hong Kong, killing 19 people and injuring 62. Police have arrested the driver and charged him with causing death by dangerous driving. Sophia Tran-Thompson has this report, and we should warn that it does contain some images that viewers may find distressing.
The 12-metre double-decker was taking spectators and workers home from the Sha Tin racecourse after the last race of the day. The bus appears to have slid and flipped onto its side, hitting a lamppost which cut through it. The driver has been arrested on counts of causing death and grievous bodily harm by dangerous driving.
The driver was 10 minutes late and he lost his temper when he started driving. Some people were complaining and he drove the bus like he was driving a plane. When he turned, the bus crashed.
It was very chaotic. He drove so fast. The bus toppled immediately when making a turn, so all the people fell down and piled up.
Some passengers managed to climb out of the wreckage on their own. Others had to be cut free by the fire brigade. Authorities say 10 of the injured are in a critical condition, fighting for their lives, while a further 20 are in a serious condition. Sophia Tran-Thompson, BBC News.
And now to Colombia, where new migration restrictions have led to long queues on the border with Venezuela. The main bridge between the two countries has been opening and closing intermittently since the Colombian president announced tighter rules for Venezuelans entering the country. More than 40,000 people have already left the crisis-hit country. Thousands are expected to either stay or travel on to other countries in South America. Now, the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has been in Bangladesh, where he's visited Rohingya refugees who've been escaping violence in neighbouring Myanmar. Nearly 700,000 people have been forced to leave their homes after a military crackdown began 6 months ago. Rita Chakrabarti was with the Foreign Secretary as he visited the Balukhali camp.
Cries of welcome to a guest from a people who've been kicked out of their home.
We're going to try and get you back home, guys.
Boris Johnson came to see and hear for himself from the victims of this huge man-made disaster. He heard story after story of arson, rape and murder, committed, say the Rohingya victims, by the military and Buddhist mobs in Myanmar.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry.
What do you think of what you've heard so far?
Well, it's overwhelming, and obviously these people have seen some pretty horrifying things, and you're very conscious when talking to particularly the young people that you don't want to trigger terrible memories for them. It was very clear with the case of the guy who'd only narrowly escaped and who'd almost lost his daughter and who'd been beaten and who had to ransom his daughter back and who kept breaking down in tears.
The people that Boris Johnson is meeting here are all in limbo. Bangladesh doesn't want them here permanently, but they can't go back to Myanmar without guarantees of safety. So what can Britain do to help?
It's about finding a political solution, finding an answer in Myanmar, from Burma, creating the conditions for a safe, dignified return for these people. That's what they want. They do want to go back, but they don't feel safe.
That's the message the Foreign Secretary is taking to Myanmar, where he landed tonight. He admits a safe return for the Rohingya presently looks unrealistic. It's a very tough diplomatic battle he has to fight. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News on the Myanmar-Bangladesh border.
President Trump has spoken out about his decision to block the release of a classified Democratic Party memo over the FBI's Russia probe. The memo rebutted claims there was anti-Trump bias in the FBI's investigation of Russian meddling in the US presidential election. Mr. Trump has tweeted that the document was very political and long and would have to be heavily redacted before it could be released. Our correspondent David Willis has the latest from Washington.
Last week, President Trump signed off on the release of a Republican memo detailing what it alleged were surveillance abuses on the part of the FBI involving a former Trump campaign aide, a man called Carter Page, back in 2016. Both the FBI and the Justice Department advised against the release of that memo, but President Trump did so anyway. Now, then the Democrats got their rebuttal memo together, and it went to 10 pages, considerably longer than the original Republican memo. The FBI and the Justice Department again advised against it being released, but this time the president decided to back their recommendations. Now, the president is a Republican, of course. Democrats are crying foul. They say it's a double standard. They say this is all evidence of the fact that in their view, President Trump has something to hide. Meanwhile, the president himself tweeted basically saying that the Democrats knew that large parts of their memo would have to be heavily redacted. Thus, by submitting it to the White House, they set the White House and the president up for claims of lack of transparency.
Gerry Adams's 34-year leadership of Sinn Fein came to an end on Saturday as Mary Lou McDonald formally took over as party president. In her first speech as leader, she told delegates in Dublin it was time for the party to embrace fresh thinking and bold ideas. She also said she wants to secure and win a referendum on Irish unity. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has been looking at the conference.
Now, other issues that Mary Lou McDonald touched on in her speech: international issues, the Middle East, Catalonia, climate change, which she said was going to be very important in the years to come, but also issues more specific to politics here on the island of Ireland, the legacy of the conflict in Northern Ireland, for example. She paid tribute to her predecessors who've led Sinn Fein, and she very much put the emphasis on the party's overall aim, which is achieving at some point in the future a united Ireland. She said she was prepared to engage with unionists in pursuit of that aim, try to persuade them. However, I think many unionists still feel extremely suspicious of Sinn Féin given the legacy of the past, and in terms of building relationships with them, that will be an uphill struggle for Mary Lou McDonald. However, it is hoped that this leader, with a very different background to Gerry Adams, will be able to take Sinn Féin to new places electorally and will enable Sinn Féin to build new relationships in a way that was more difficult for past generation of leaders who direct experience of the conflict in Northern Ireland.
Now to some action